So what we're looking at here is a scene from 1930s New York City. And what I want you to look at here is that there's not one overweight or obese person walking on the streets. Everyone is fit and strong, and everyone is slim and trim.
The oil monopoly of John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil had gone into the petrochemical business, and through extensive research they had developed certain medications which they called wonder drugs, and the public, as they took these drugs, they would wonder what was going to happen to them. That's why they were wonder drugs. Others were called miracle drugs. They were called miracle drugs because if you took them and you survived, it was really a miracle. So this was the contribution of the monopolists to the medical monopoly. And the only thing that these drugs had in common was that they were enormously expensive. Now, in contrast, most of nature's remedies are enormously inexpensive. They're available, they're abundant, they're cheap, which means that the medical monopoly did not want you to use any of these medications. They wanted the greatest achievement of the modern drug trust was the invention of the $1,000 pill. They have now they have one pill which costs $1,000, which you use in cancer and various things. And nature, unfortunately, has never learned how to make a $1,000 pill. So obviously, nature is no good as far as the medical monopoly is concerned.
But tell us a little bit, just before we get into that also, there's a difference between homeopathic medicine and allopathic, and that's part of what we're discussing also. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would, used to smell it.
Well, what you're talking about is a historic situation. In the 19th century, most Americans thrived on what is called homeopathic medicine, which is mostly naturopathic remedies available through nature in abundance at low cost. Well, the medical monopoly, which was formed in 1847 as the American Medical Association, they didn't like this. They thought, how are doctors going to get rich, and how are we going to control the people through the medical monopoly when they can go to these homeopathic people and get these remedies at very low cost? So the first plank of the AMA was, we will never allow any homeopathic physician to become a member of the AMA, and they never have. So, but the AMA was still in the minority. So around the turn of the century, John D. Rockefeller realized there were great potentialities of profit in the medical industry. And so he took over the medical profession. Now you say, how could anybody take over the medical profession? Well, first you have to have a lot of money, and second you have a lot of power. Well, he had both, and he did. So he revamped the entire medical system of treatment of the people of the United States, which had been homeopathic. He switched it over to allopathic medicine, which is a different type of practice, originating in Germany. And the great attraction of allopathic medicine is it relies on radical surgery. I mean, if you can't cure it, cut it off. And the heavy use of drugs, because when you're having your limbs cut off, you need a lot of drugs because it's very disturbing. And lengthy hospital stays, none of which are features of homeopathic medicine. It's entirely the reverse. So by taking over the medical industry in 1910, through studies which he made through the Carnegie Foundation, John D. Rockefeller emerged as the kingpin of the medical monopoly in the United States. And he now presided over an allopathic system of medicine controlled through every legislature by accreditation of hospitals, control of physicians, control of medications, and which is essentially what we have today. So from 1910, when this change was effected, right to the present day, the cost of healthcare has multiplied astronomically in the United States to the point where it is no longer available to most American citizens. So how did they counteract this? When they got us to the point where the average working man could not afford hospital care or the allopathic system of treatment, they set up an insurance industry, medical insurance. And through this, they were able to spread out the costs among everybody. And health insurance today is simply another tax on the American people. In fact, it functions through the Social Security system as a tax on the recipients of Social Security. They say, well, now that you've reached your senior citizen state, you have Social Security coming in, so then they jerk back a good portion of it as Medicare costs, which they raise every year. And so eventually, probably, Social Security and Medicare will be equal, so you'll get a check every month, which will be 000. They say, well, here's your Social Security check, but we've deducted your Medicare costs, and so now you get zero.
Is going on with big food, and is it making us sick?
Cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, obesity, autoimmune conditions, these are all going up, and they are all foodborne illnesses. And the fact that there is not clear communication about that from our medical leaders and public policy leaders, I think is the biggest scandal in America and the most dangerous scandal. We are being brought to our knees by metabolic dysfunction tied to food. 8 of the 10 killers of Americans, as I mentioned, some of them are directly tied to food. That also includes depression. Depression is skyrocketing, and as Chris Palmer at Harvard and some other prominent doctors are pointing out, brain conditions are metabolic dysfunctions. I frame it that way to kind of set the table that what's happening right now in America, where 30% of children have prediabetes, where 80% of adults are obese or overweight, where 50% of adults have fatty liver disease and 20% of teens have fatty liver disease. You only saw this condition in elderly alcoholics just a generation ago. We're destroying our human capital, and obviously something we're being told is complicated, but it's very simple. And it's taken me many, many years to come to this conclusion.
They say diamonds are forever. Some friendships are forever too. Certain bonds are forever. Certain chemical bonds are forever too. But unlike diamonds and most friendships and emotional bonds, these chemicals are dangerous, aka cancerous. They can also reduce our responses to vaccines, deter our growth, increase the level of cholesterol in our bodies, and put us at the risk of heart diseases. In short, these chemicals shorten our lifespan. Ironically enough, they're called forever chemicals, PFAS. What is that short for? This. Where are they found? Well, this is where the story gets very interesting. These chemicals are literally found everywhere, and they have been placed there by us humans. Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Did you generously apply sunscreen this morning? The egg you made this morning, was it on a non-stick pan? The food you ordered a couple of days ago, was it delivered in a takeaway container? Well, you have exposed yourself to forever chemicals. These are a group of 4,700 odd types of compounds, all created by joining carbon and fluorine. Now, this bond is the strongest in organic chemistry. What I mean is, chemicals made by joining carbon and fluorine cannot be broken down by heat, sunlight, or water. Most other chemicals can, but forever chemicals cannot. These chemicals neither degrade in the environment nor in our bodies. They remain for years, for decades, hence the name. Forever chemicals have been used in products since the 1940s. They make items heat, moisture, and water resistant. The two most commonly used forever chemicals are PFOS and PFOA. They're found in our water, in our kitchens, in our food chains, even in our carpets. You know the carpets that don't catch wine stain? They are made of forever chemicals. Microwave popcorn bags, forever chemicals again. Non-stick pots, food packaging, pizza boxes, water-resistant makeup, shampoo, dental floss, paints, varnishes, rainproof coats, all of them have forever chemicals. Basically, anything that promises to be water resistant or moisture resistant is bound to have PFAS. Even our primers have them, our furniture too. Now let's look at what these chemicals can do to our bodies. Studies have shown that exposure to forever chemicals can interfere with our hormones. They can increase the risk of cancer, affect our immune system, our reproductive system. Forever chemicals can also increase birth defects, deter a person's chance of getting pregnant, affect an infant's growth, learning, and behavior. Let me tell you a story from West Virginia. There was a Teflon-making plant in a place called Parkersburg. Now, Teflon is the chemical that is used to make our pans non-stick. So this plant ended up contaminating the water in Parkersburg. People were exposed to high levels of forever chemicals. Farmers lost hundreds of cattle. Researchers studied 70,000 adults living in the area. They found a possible link between high PFOA blood levels and high cholesterol. Also links between forever chemicals and ulcerative colitis. thyroid functioning, testicular cancer, kidney cancer, preeclampsia, and elevated blood pressure during pregnancy. A report released by the Center for Disease Control showed a link between PFAS and birth defects, even liver damage. Does this mean even a little exposure to forever chemicals can lead to problems of this kind? Honestly, scientists do not know. I'll give you an example. The US Environmental Protection Agency once said that forever chemicals in drinking water should not exceed 70 ppt, 70 parts per trillion. This was before what happened in Parkersburg came to light. Soon a study by the Centers for Disease Control revealed that EPA had overestimated the amount of forever chemicals we can consume. The European Commission has proposed a limit of 100 ppt for drinking water. Environmental Working Organization says forever chemicals should not exceed 1 ppt in drinking water. Who will check this limit? Forever chemicals, you see, are mobile. They flow in water. They pollute rivers, groundwater, even our drinking water. We are continuously exposed to PFAS every day. Over time, the levels of forever chemicals build up in your body. What happens next? Research is underway to try and answer that question. One scientist, though, said, "We know enough that we should be very concerned."
In second grade, he started having problems. He had a hard time concentrating. One day I looked at him and said, "Do your best to focus." And he said, "I can't concentrate, Mom. My brain buzzes." Brain buzzes? I have a PhD in cognitive neuroscience. If I learned anything in college, it's the brains are not supposed to buzz. So I started looking for answers. I searched the textbooks, scientific research articles, and I scoured the internet. And I found articles on the artificial food dye Red 40 and how it caused hyperactivity in some children. I found story after story about how Red 40 caused ADHD-like symptoms in some kids. It made them hyper, impulsive, disruptive in class, and caused brain buzzing. So I thought, aha, it's the Red 40. And we pulled everything with Red 40 in it from our diet. And the brain buzzing stopped. But we let him consume other foods with other artificial dyes like yellow 5 and 6, green 3, blue 1. In hindsight, I don't know why we thought those were safe when Red 40 wasn't. Maybe we couldn't imagine pulling everything with artificial food dyes from our home and our diet. That meant no more colored cupcakes, no more cheesy yellow chips, no pickles, no candies, no colored breakfast cereals. You see, artificial food dyes are in many of the foods, of the processed foods that we eat. Maybe we just couldn't imagine taking away foods that kids enjoy in their childhood. Now, I bet many of you are wondering, what are artificial food dyes? Well, they are a set of chemicals that are added to our food to enhance the color and appearance. They are man-made, petroleum-based, and banned in many countries. They provide no nutritional value, and many have been linked to cancer.
Whether it's fruits and vegetables or meat and poultry, a lot of our food, even very natural food, it seems, contains plastic.
And outside of the grocery aisles, fast food may be even worse. WBZ's Christina Rax shows us a new study that lays out the risks and what to avoid.
Cheerios is billed as a heart-healthy way to start your day. But a recent Consumer Report study on tiny bits of plastic in our food may tell a different story.
We wanted to see, number one, are they there in the food? And number two, what were the concentrations?
The nonprofit consumer organization tested 85 different food products for the plastics known as phthalates, and the results were concerning.
Of the 85 different products that we tested, only one had 0 phthalates in them.
The so-called heart-healthy Cheerios from General Mills had nearly 11,000 nanograms of phthalates per serving. However, it was far from the worst offender. Many fast foods wore that crown. Burger King's Whopper with cheese had more than 20,000 nanograms, and Wendy's crispy chicken nuggets had nearly 34,000 nanograms per serving.
We also say reduce or totally avoid fast food, because in our article it shows that the fast food was particularly high in plasticizers.
A meal typically eaten by children actually topped the list. Annie's organic cheesy ravioli, another General Mills food, had more than 53,000 nanograms per serving. In a statement, a General Mills spokesperson told WBZ, food safety is our top priority at General Mills. We review the ingredients and packaging we buy and the companies that supply them on a regular cadence. The products tested by Consumer Reports were within regulatory requirements.
Plastics are really everywhere in foods.
Dr. Philip Landrigan is a professor at Boston College. He researches chemicals found in food. He says these chemicals that leach out of plastic containers and bags have the potential to be extremely harmful to your body.
The phthalates are chemicals that have the ability to disrupt endocrine function. They can cause toxicity to the liver, which in turn changes levels of cholesterol and other lipids in the serum, and they push up rates of heart disease and stroke in the American population.
If it's affecting people's health and hormones, and there are other options, then companies probably won't be incentivized to do anything unless there's rules.
Rules that are not in abundance when it comes to plastics in the U.S.
More than 80% of the chemicals in commerce today have never been tested for safety or efficacy. We're basically, we and our kids are surrounded by chemicals whose hazard is simply not known.
That's why we have called on the FDA, for instance, for a total ban of any phthalates or phthalate substitutes for these plasticizers. Just ban them.
Still, there are a few things you can do to minimize your exposure.
What we want to do is urge consumers to try to reduce your exposure by not eating as much processed foods.
One very proven effective way to minimize exposure is to eat organic.
Don't microwave your food in plastic containers. Don't even store them in plastic containers. Use glass.
We reached out to Burger King and Wendy's, but we did not hear back. Now, the FDA says it's aware of the issue and noted that phthalates are not authorized to be directly added to food.
Have you ever eaten ramen noodles? Exactly. Here's the deal. New research from the Mayo Clinic is showing that it can increase the risk for metabolic syndrome, especially for women. And that can mean increased risk for heart problems, stroke, and diabetes. But researchers say it's not just ramen. Any instant noodle products could be putting you in danger if you're eating them more than twice a week. So why are women affected the most? Probably because of BPA that's found in the packaging, which is known to mess with those estrogen levels. And a flashback for you tonight from our newscast back in 2012, and a look at what exactly happens once ramen noodles make it into your stomach. And it's all thanks to a camera swallowed like a pill. You can see the stomach contracting back and forth, trying to grind up those noodles.
Striking thing about our experiment, when you looked at a time interval, 1 hour or 2 hours, we noticed that processed ramen noodles were less broken down than homemade ramen noodles.
And take a closer look. You can clearly see the difference between 20 minutes and 2 hours of digestion. This one study couldn't conclude that processed ramen is harmful. In fact, the study was too small to be conclusive about anything.
Well, let's see what Chick-fil-A has. Over 50 chemicals in the chicken sandwich. Over 40 of them were man-made chemicals. I said, so hell, this is a dope sandwich. So they really are flipping birds over there. Because there's no way in the world to justify. So whenever I seen that, I said it in a message, and someone took the clip of it and then went on the website of Chick-fil-A, had it broke down where they were clicking on it, showing all of the ingredients and these chemicals that were in it. Do you know the next day, Chick-fil-A took that down off their website? So now you can't find the ingredients to the Chick-fil-A sandwich or the Popeyes chicken sandwich, because they don't want you to know that they're drugging you.
We want to turn now to a series of stories that we are doing this week on how U.S. food regulations have left American consumers exposed to chemicals and additives that have been banned in other countries. CBS's Holly Williams goes in depth to show us how some of these ingredients may be linked to cancer and other health-related issues.
From baguettes to focaccia, Europe is famous for its bread. But one ingredient is missing. Potassium bromate is a suspected carcinogen that's banned for human consumption in Europe as well as China and India, but legal in the US, where it's used by some food makers to strengthen dough and estimated to be present in over 100 products.
There is evidence that it may be toxic to human consumers, that it may even either initiate or promote the development of tumours.
Professor Eric Millstone is an expert on food additives and told us European countries take a much more cautious approach to food safety.
Can we say for sure that these differences in regulations mean that people in the US have developed cancers that they would not have developed if they'd been eating only in Europe?
I think that is almost certainly the conclusion that we could reach.
It's not just potassium bromate, but many other chemicals and substances that are banned here in Europe over health concerns, but considered safe by the FDA.
Do you think most Americans are aware that they're being exposed to substances that are viewed as dangerous over here?
They probably just think, well, if it's available and it's in the store, then it's probably fine.
Stacey McNamara is from upstate New York, but has been living in London for 10 years. She told us raising children on this side of the Atlantic has opened her eyes to what's allowed in food in the US. She has no plans to ever move back home.
And is food safety a part of that decision?
For sure, yeah. How am I going to protect my children when it's just everywhere?
In a statement to CBS News, the FDA said that when used properly, potassium bromate converts to a harmless substance during food production. But at the same time, Nora, it acknowledged that not all potassium bromate may convert, saying control measures can minimize the amount in food.
Citrus sodas and Gatorade. And why? Because they contain a compound called BVO, or brominated vegetable oil. And this is very toxic to our health. We'll find them in things like Mountain Dew. So quite often what you'll notice is that these products, if you see them in another country, that the company has literally removed the BVO, the brominated vegetable oil, from the product, and now it's a healthier version of that. We see that with for instance, the Mexican Coke. Everybody's heard of a Mexican Coca-Cola. Okay, it's called that simply because they removed the high fructose corn syrup, which is detrimental to our health, and put in a quote-unquote natural sugar.
Fast food companies and other food processors drive down the cost of food relentlessly and force economies of scale and efficiencies, or what are called efficiencies, on farming. And I'll just give you one example. If you go to McDonald's, anywhere in the world, you will find French fries, or chips as you call them, and you will find that they're always made from the same potato, the russet Burbank potato. This is a potato from America that's unusually long and difficult to grow, but that's what they want, because when you're McDonald's, you like those red boxes with a little bouquet of very long chips. It looks really good. And so they insist that all their potatoes be russet Burbanks, and they further insist that they have no blemishes at all. There's a very common defect of russet Burbank potatoes called net necrosis. And you've seen potatoes with a little brown line sometimes, or spots that come through it. Well, McDonald's won't buy them if your potatoes have that. And the only way to eliminate that is to eliminate an aphid. And the only way to do that is with a pesticide called Monitor. That is so toxic that the farmers who grow these potatoes in Idaho won't venture outside into their fields for 5 days after they spray. And then when they harvest their potatoes, they have to put them in these atmosphere-controlled sheds the size of a football stadium because they're not edible for 6 weeks. They have to off-gas all the chemicals in them. So you see, the desire for a certain kind of chip leads to a certain kind of agriculture. But the other thing on the health side, when I started learning about nutrition, about which, by the way, much less is known than you might think, that the scientific understanding of nutrition is still very primitive. But I learned that what mattered most about one's health was not necessarily the nutrients, good or bad, that you were consuming or staying away from, or even the calorie counts. But what predicted a healthy diet more than anything else is the fact that it was being cooked by a human being and not a corporation. Corporations cook very differently than people do. They use vast amounts of salt, fat, and sugar, much more than you would ever use in your own cooking. And the reason they do that is those are three incredibly attractive and incredibly cheap ingredients. And when they're layered properly, as in a chip or various pastries and forms of junk food, they're incredibly addictive. And in fact, people in the industry, they don't talk about addiction in the food industry, even though they traffic in addiction. They talk about craveability. It's the same thing. And snackability is another term they use. It's a lovely word. Anyway, so I came to see that cooking has a huge bearing on our health. And in fact, there's been a lot of research in America that shows that even poor women who cook have healthier diets than wealthy women who don't. So you see the usual class bias in the quality of diet is overtaken by this fact, this key fact. Who's cooking your food?
People who eat hot dogs eat them because they taste so good. But what's in them is not so good. You know, we've learned to accept it, but I don't know if you'll feel so accepting after this. The company Clear Foods recently analyzed 345 hot dog and sausage products from 75 brands and retailers and found, are you hot dog lovers ready for this? Human DNA in 2% of the samples and in 2/3 of the vegetarian samples. And get this, 10% of all vegetarian products appear to contain meat. Clear Foods says that there are some companies producing high-quality hot dog, top scores to Butterball, McCormick, Eckrich, and Hebrew National. Human DNA.
We know we should be eating less red meat, but for the first time we're being told to avoid the white stuff too. British researchers have now identified a link between eating chicken and cancer.
For years, we've been told it's a healthy alternative to red meat, but now chicken is on the chopping block. Researchers from Oxford University followed 475,000 middle-aged Britons from 2006 to 2014. 23,000 developed cancer. Red meat intake was linked to those who developed colorectal cancer, breast cancer and prostate cancer, while poultry was associated with malignant melanoma, prostate cancer and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But it's not as bad as it sounds.
We need to remember that it's only an association. So the people that ate more had supposedly an increased cancer risk. At this stage, there's no clear direct evidence that eating poultry will increase your cancer risk.
Last month, scientists in the United States found women who ate a lot of chicken had a 15% lower risk of developing breast cancer. And even the UK study acknowledges more investigation into their research is needed. As for die-hard chicken fans, they won't hear a bad word about the bird.
One of those great urban myths. It sounds like some faddish thing that someone's grabbed onto, and I don't think so.
Despite the association made by researchers, chicken is not a carcinogen. The study also failed to take into account how you cook your chook. While further research is needed into these latest findings, dietitians recommend including poultry as part of a well-balanced diet.
All right, we're back now with a growing new debate. Now, this may look like your average chicken fillet, but it's actually cell-cultivated meat, an emerging technique where meat is developed in a male container just like this from a sample of animal cells and does not require killing animals. Proponents of the method say it's an ethical and sustainable protein option for generations to come. They also argue there are geopolitical incentives to invest in the technology, as the U.S.'s main competition in this space right now is China, which is ramping up efforts to improve their cultivated meat industry. But Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is saying he's against lab-grown meat, and Florida should be as well. Take a listen.
I know the legislature's doing a bill to try to protect our meat. You need meat, okay? And we're going to have meat in Florida. Like, we're going to have fake meat. Like, that doesn't work. So we're going to make sure to do it right.
And Florida's Senate passed a bill last month banning it.
You can't beat British grub. But these days, you've got to spend a packet to bring home the bacon. And don't even get me started on the eggs. The cost of living crisis is hitting Britain hard, with food prices rising at the fastest rate in 40 years. But now, a new line of affordable protein is hitting our shelves. This is engineered human meat. That's right, a protein made from human cells that promises to be cheaper and tastier than any of its competitors. I'm Greg Wallace, and I'm off to visit Good Harvest, where a whopping 6 tons of human meat is engineered every day. that is stunning. With the promise of cheap meat for all, it may well be the meaty miracle we need to ease the squeeze of the cost of living.
Anyone for human meat? I'm Michelle Ackley, and while Greg comes face to face with the production line, I'll be conducting a taste test with some very picky palates.
It's really, tender. For the first time, we're going to find out where it comes from, how it's made, whoa, and what it tastes like. Great thing about it, it's an opportunity to be paid. Would you ever consider donating yourself?
Yeah, maybe I would. I mean, I may have to. My bills are as high as anybody else's. You know, I've got a young family, I've got a daughter to feed, so...
And would you feed your family human steaks?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Already have.
After the donor's tissue samples are placed in the nutrient vat, they're stimulated with electrodes and left to grow at 40 degrees centigrade at the proving bay.
So, Greg, after a few hours, this is what we're left with.
Whoa! No way! Mate, that's the biggest chunk of meat I've ever seen. I mean, scientifically, that's amazing, but in terms of food, that is stunning.
It is incredible.
Are found in some macaroni and cheese and other cheese products.
The findings are not surprising or inconsistent with unfortunately increasing literature that has documented phthalates easily getting into and staying in especially dairy products.
Phthalates are chemicals used to make plastics soft and can get into food during packaging and processing. They can disrupt the hormones in the body and could affect the developing brains of children. Dr. Leonardo Trisande at NYU Langone Medical Center says his research has shown a link between phthalates and increases in blood pressure and resistance to insulin in children. While it's difficult to avoid phthalates, Dr. Trisande says simple steps can reduce your exposure.
Eating fresh fruits and vegetables in particular is a great way to avoid contact with the food packaging in the first place.
Experts say don't microwave in plastic. The heat can cause the chemical to seep into your food. Also, don't use the dishwasher for plastics. Glass and stainless steel containers are good alternatives for storage. And if a plastic container is scratched or damaged, it's best to toss it. Don Champion for CP.
You may start to see something new on food labels. The word bioengineered will replace the old term GMO.
Consumer reporter Susan Hogan is working for you to explain this change so that you can make some smart and healthy choices for your family.
Well, that's right. Both the new term bioengineered and the one it's replacing, GMO, refer to foods that have had their DNA altered to either enhance their nutritional value or make them resistant to disease. So if you pay attention to food labels, you've probably seen GMO on some products made with food like corn and soybeans, foods like canola oil or sugar. But now GMO will be called bioengineered on food labels. The changes are part of the USDA's new rules that went into effect this year to create a national standard for labeling. The words mean the same thing, but some critics say because GMOs have a bad rap, changing the name is somewhat deceitful to consumers.
Now they suddenly decide, oh, we're not going to call it GMO anymore. We're going to call it BE, bioengineered, right? So that's already hiding the fact. Most people don't know what bioengineered is. They'll see it on their label and say, well, I don't know what that means.
So here's what the new labeling is going to look like. For example, this cereal box, which is now in compliance, lets you know right there on the labeling that it contains bioengineered ingredients. Or some products will display labels like these. And under the new labeling laws, food manufacturers also have the option to simply put a QR code like this one on its packaging. So now the burden is on you to scan it in order to see whether there are bioengineered ingredients in the product you want to buy. Some food safety groups claim this discriminates against a huge population of consumers.
Approximately 1/3 of Americans, we're talking about 100 million people, or over 100 million people, don't have the smartphones. And it's primarily the elderly. People of low income, which is often people of color, they are actually locked out altogether. They won't get anything. They won't even get the BE or bioengineered or even the QR code because they can't access that.
The Center for Food Safety filed a lawsuit against the USDA to block these new rules. The case is still ongoing. So when it comes to whether bioengineered foods are safe, well, it really depends on who you talk to. The FDA, USDA, and the EPA all ensure that they are safe for humans. And some food scientists believe they are incredibly helpful to the overall production of certain crops.
If you think about drought-resistant crops, we take a crop that is drought-resistant, we identify those genes, and we put it into a crop that's not drought-resistant. And we're able to increase crop productivity and yields in doing so. And it's really a technology that's extremely safe.
And to add to even more confusion, the one thing that's not changing, those foods that don't have bioengineered ingredients can continue using labels like this, the non-GMO label, on their package.
Now, before we dive into what bioengineered food is, I am curious to hear, have you seen the word bioengineered in the grocery store since this January? And do you know what the term bioengineered actually means? From the perspective of a consumer, I could see how this change to using bioengineered came as quite a surprise. But from the perspective of food manufacturers or food producers, they actually knew this change was coming for years now. And that's because this law, the National Bioengineered Food Disclosure Law, which I just feel like that's not a smooth name, but this food disclosure law, this was signed in 2016. So food producer engineered foods put forth in this new law says that bioengineered foods contain detectable genetic material that could not be derived from conventional breeding. Instead, you have to use certain lab techniques, and this genetic material otherwise would not be found in nature. You can have actually up to 5% of that ingredient be bioengineered substances if it's technically unavoidable, maybe there is not an alternative, or if it was inadvertently added. Next, any food products that have meat, poultry, or eggs listed as the first ingredient actually don't follow this new bioengineered law. That is because these products are regulated by different USDA statutes, so they will not follow this new bioengineering rule. The last thing I want to point out is really these food laws are mostly aimed at large food manufacturers. So a lot of different smaller food producers are exempt from labeling their products bioengineered. These are things like food trucks, restaurants, cafeterias, a lot of these more small businesses. They do not have to follow this bioengineering rule. Now, for all the hullabaloo about labeling foods as bioengineered or not labeling them, I just want to point out that the FDA and the National Academy of Sciences have found no proof that bioengineered foods are worse for your health or that they are unsafe. And
I'm going to explain it to you. First, I want you to understand why having a seed and fruit is so important. And then secondarily, I'm going to explain to you why today there are so many fruits in the market that don't have seeds in them, okay? So that's what we're going to go through today, and I hope you sort of get the drift of why it's so important not to eat those type of fruits. And to demand we have fruits that have seeds in them in our markets, our local markets today. Okay, so let's first start with the idea of why is it so important to have a seed in fruit, okay? And the way I'm going to sort of break it down to you is this. The life cycle, whether you're talking about fruits or whether you're talking about us as humans, all originates with a seed. And what I mean by that is this. A man has a seed, and that's called sperm, okay? A woman has a seed, that is an egg, okay? Without a seed, they are both infertile. They're not capable of producing offspring, okay? And so it helps you understand from a life cycle standpoint how their seed is important to humans first. Secondarily, if you look at fruits all begin with a seed, okay? And so let me sort of break that down to you. A seed goes in the ground, and we're talking about the original seed, thousands and thousands of years ago. Goes into the ground, grows, creates a mango tree, okay? A mango seed creates a mango tree. That mango tree then creates fruit. That fruit is called mango, okay? That mango, if a human comes by, eats it, or an animal comes by and eats it, takes it off a mile or two away from the tree, drops that seed on the ground, it could eventually go into the ground, create another tree, and now it has offspring. It probably started off as a hybridization process, but eventually what happened was genetically modified companies like Monsanto came into the picture and created this terminator gene that could go inside of the DNA of fruits and actually remove the seed from the fruit so that the seeds don't grow inside of the fruit. That may look like in the beginning to be a marvel of genius when it comes to adding more convenience so that we don't have to worry about the seeds. But here's where the plot thickens, and now we understand what those type of
absorb through your feet. It's like taking handfuls of antioxidants, but you're getting it through the feet.
Grounding means connecting to the earth to support the specific function of the organs of your body. It supports the body as a whole, but it specifically supports organ systems down to the tissues and the cellular function of the entire body.
Cook's Illustrated. We found one magic ingredient that does the trick on surface pesticides: baking soda. Most surface pesticides are unstable at an alkaline pH. Mixing a little baking soda into water creates an alkaline environment, and soaking the produce briefly in this breaks down the pesticide's compounds and helps them wash away. These cards detect two common external pesticides, so we made a vinegar solution and a baking soda solution, and tested both against a plain water rinse. And look at that, the grapes from the baking soda bath is the only strip that turned blue, indicating it was effective at removing these pesticides. 2 teaspoons per quart of water and a 30-second soak is all you need. Food knowledge through science from your friends at Cook's Illustrated.
Completely empty because we just harvested our potatoes, but we started a new batch here. Meanwhile, we have these potatoes. They're about 30 days old. I just find it really nice and easy to rotate out these tubs about every 30 days. And lastly, I mainly use all these big tubs for stuff we're always constantly eating, so that way we don't have to go to the grocery store. Everyone should learn how to grow food in containers. And no, this ain't a monstera plant, it's actually a zucchini. As a matter of fact, here's a zucchini forming right here. Growing all the food you can in a container is actually very practical. And that's because I don't have to worry about fire ants, bugs, or even weeds. Especially if you grow your own food in self-wicking containers. And that's because there's no holes except for that one hole right here in this container.
Moving on to other veggies, we grew lots of fennel, which actually is considered to be a vegetable, spice, and herb all at the same time. We grew full towers of leeks, which are really slow growers and require patience since it can take up to 6 months for the leeks to reach maturity. We also grew green onions, where we were able to grow 220 green onions on one tower. There was never a shortage of leafy greens in our farm, where we grew parsley, different types of lettuce, mint, cilantro, kale, and chard. We also love to cultivate different types of Asian greens such as komatsuna, hontatsai, mizuna, choisum, wasabina, and Tokyo Bekana. Here's a recap of what we grew in our vertical farm using aeroponic towers over the last 6 months. Starting with the big brassicas, we grew broccoli, and although it takes almost 4 months for broccoli to reach maturity, we were able to grow 18 broccolis on one aeroponic tower. We also grew different types of cauliflowers, including standard white cauliflower as well as yellow cauliflower, which is naturally yellow due to the heightened presence of beta-carotenes found in this variety of cauliflower. When it comes to cabbages, we were always growing our favorite variety known as farro cabbage, but we also cultivated conehead cabbages as well. Another brassica vegetable we grew were kohlrabis, where we grew green kohlrabis as well as purple kohlrabis, where we were able to grow 44 kohlrabis on one aeroponic tower. We grew different types of bok choy, including white bok choy and green bok choy, which are really delicious in stir fries. Moving on to other veg.
Ready? Get this. A surplus of energy in a hydrated alkaline environment. A surplus of energy in a hydrated alkaline environment, and your body will repair everything. So I'm going to explain what that means. We're going to look at the slides, 2 cadavers here. We have one unhealthy specimen and one more healthy specimen. What you're going to see a difference in here on the inside. This is the liver. Look how clean that is. Look how dirty this liver is. Look at how clean this part of the intestine is. Look at the blackened stomach and pancreas and spleen. Look how high the diaphragm has pushed up around that heart. Look at the buildup in the bowel. This is mucoid plaque that builds up within the walls of the bowel and can't be flushed out, must be drawn out. Look at the bladder being crushed. Look at how filthy the omentum is. That's where a majority of your immune system is compared to this one. Although this healthier specimen has a lot of buildup also. Now, I want you to pay attention to this shape right here, including the brain. That's inside the body, okay? Everything outside of this cavity is external, outside of the body, especially the body's Tupperware, fat. And your fat cells can engorge many times their size with toxins and acids. So the inside of the body must be kept a perfect way. It must be kept alkaline at an exact pH, and it must be kept hydrated, and it must be toxin-free. Otherwise, the critical internal organs start to die.
You can grow your own toilet paper. This is the toilet paper plant, and the leaves are soft as can be. It's the Charmin of the garden. And the leaves grow to be about the same size as a piece of toilet paper. Although it is super soft, it is also very durable, strong, and will not break. All you have to do is get a cutting of it